All right, we are live. Today, we are going to be talking with Adrian King, the CTO of Elements.Cloud, about their Agile Mapping Tool for Salesforce on System.Debug.
I was wondering if you were going to say on System.Debug. That's why it took me a second.
I know. Almost forgot. All right, so Dreamforce, big thing. Couple of weeks, guys. Less than 5 weeks.
Something like that, yeah.
Right. And then also I want to bring up real quick, we still are selling HungerCast shirts. All the profits from the shirts are going to go to Feeding Texas, which is a food bank out in Texas, and they're helping with the Hurricane Harvey relief agency. You can get a System.Debug one that says worldhunger.remove, or you can go ahead and you can get this one, which is got the HungerCast logo right here on the front. It says Feeding Texas on the bottom. And then it has our partner podcasts, To Wit, Automation Hour, and of course our friends over at Gift Squad for Good, who are all participating in this. And you can get shirts with their logos on it as well, or you can get this main one. They're selling for $25, and about $10 from the sale of every shirt goes towards Feeding Texas. So it's a really good cause. And if you get a chance to log in and go to teespring.com/stores/HungerCast17, there will be a link down in the bottom section. So also, if you like what you see today, remember to subscribe, like the video. That's really cool. Once again, I'm going to bring up, we have Adrian King. He is the CTO over at Elements.Cloud, and they are a ISV on Salesforce with a freemium model product for agile development to build, basically set up your whole process on how you want to develop your software by mapping it out inside of Salesforce. Is that about right, Adrian?
Yeah, it's probably a bit more than that, but I can talk a bit about what we, the full breadth, and the offering is growing all the time. So yeah, I'll talk a bit about what we do. But guys, thank you very much for inviting me onto the show. Really appreciate it.
No problem.
And what I want to do today is I'll talk a little bit about really about what the Elements.Cloud, what we're trying to do, and why we're so focused on the Salesforce space.
So before we get into that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Adrian, and what some of your history with Salesforce and development is?
Yeah, perfect. I'm depressingly old in the software tech world, I've decided. I was laughing with some people the other day that my first commercial job in this space was doing assembler programming for PDP-11s, and discovered that my entire tech team hadn't been born when I was doing that.
Oh.
So yeah, but so I did electrical and electronic engineering in university when the 8080 was a cool processor, and I actually soldered my first homebrew using the Z80 processor back in '78. So I've been through quite a lot in the tech space, and after leaving college, I worked for one of the big software houses in the defense space, and then I actually had a couple of years working at CERN in the particle physics lab in Geneva, where actually at that point Tim Berners-Lee was working and developing the World Wide Web at that point in time. Got the chance to work with Tim, and didn't understand the value of it. Shows that you should never follow me for tech inspiration and what's going to be the next big thing. But actually, since '92, I've actually worked in the software products world. So I've been working in the '90s on case tools around object-oriented analysis, and worked in document management and various things. But in 2001, I joined with a couple of my colleagues who now with Elements.Cloud, working for a company where we were doing basically mapping business processes for the quality management space. And we built a really great company around that. I was CTO and then COO for that business. We sold it to TIBCO in 2011. Great business, still going. A lot of my colleagues still there. And about a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago, Ian, Rich, and myself, the founders of Elements.Cloud, we decided to come back together to really basically reboot what we'd done in the previous company, but with a different focus. And that focus was very much about helping people around the Salesforce space understand what it is the business is trying to achieve. And I'm just going to rewind to a bit about Salesforce. I'm a massive Salesforce fan. we took Salesforce on in Nimbus in 2002. So I was original admin in 2002 on Salesforce.
That's
so,
pre-dev Salesforce.
I think we were certainly in the first 10 clients in Europe on Salesforce. Nobody can ever accuse me of not being an early adopter of technology. And I can assure you in 2002, it was fairly limited in what it could do. I mean, when I look at what Salesforce is now and what it was then, it's like, you can still see the same heart, but every other bit of the body has had a transport, it's been transplanted. You know, it's just a completely different beast now. But we built Nimbus on top of Salesforce, you know, the previous company, in terms of operationally. As COO there, I basically had a mantra that we would support no other IT system in the business other than Salesforce. And I used to metaphorically walk the corridors of the building with a baseball bat, threatening to beat up anybody who wanted to bring in any other technology. And we did an amazing job. I mean, we had 280 custom objects of our own. We were running Financial Force when it was actually, even before Financial Force was Financial Force, it was called Code2Go actually, before it was Financial Force. And I don't think my CFO has ever quite forgiven me for that decision, because it was very, very painful at the time. But actually, the outcome was fantastic. Any bit of data we had in the business was in the Salesforce platform, with all the power of linking it from one place to another. And but interestingly, and we used our own business process mapping product, the Nimbus product, to map out how our business operated. And it was enormously powerful for understanding what was it that we wanted to support with Salesforce. The reality is, if you're putting Salesforce into your business, you're putting it there to support your business processes. You have business processes you are trying to execute. And the only reason why you're automating is to support those business processes. So we used our own product extensively. I think it was one of the reasons why we had a very good implementation of Salesforce. I mean, I should also stress that every single person in the business, and when we started, we were 15 people, and by the time we sold, we were well north of 100 people. Every single person had an unlimited Salesforce license. You know, so it wasn't a cheap decision. Every single employee, plus actually partners, had unlimited license. But we got fantastic value from it, because not only did we use the core clouds, we had built everything else we did in our business. I didn't pay for any other licenses. It was Salesforce. Now, with Nimbus, we were very focused on the big corporates, understanding, particularly around compliance, understanding how they operated. So our clients were the big pharmaceuticals, Nestle, organizations like that, who primarily in the last decade were running SAP as their core system. So we did an enormous amount of work working with those organizations, understanding how they worked and to support SAP implementations. But I knew just how powerful it had been for us trying to deploy and make sure that Salesforce supported our own business. But when Ian, Rich, and myself came back together and said, you know, we've had enough time doing other things, it's time we did another startup together, I basically went, fine, if we're going to go back and reboot what we did, the market which I'd really, really like to support would be the Salesforce market. Not only is it an enormous market, and actually the sort of business tooling, there's very limited business tooling out there. The Salesforce implementations are getting more and more complex, and people are still getting enormous value out of Salesforce, but I keep on hearing things like, oh, we don't really know what we've implemented. It's getting so complex that we're getting quite scared about understanding what it is that we've built, or I've just inherited this, and actually, you need to take a step back and really understand what it is that you're trying to support in the business, have appropriate documentation, and build a development lifecycle which starts from not just some disconnected stories, but a deep understanding of what the business is trying to do, such that you can build decent requirements, business requirements, turn those into coherent set of stories, pass those into the development group, such that they've got real context and they can understand what the business is trying to achieve, build those, get that developed, test, make sure not only does Salesforce work, but the business actually works from a business point of view, supported by Salesforce, and be able to document at a business level what you've done in Salesforce, such that the constant iteration that is going on in your business is supported. So that was basically our vision 2.5 years ago, to start building a platform to support organizations, be able to take the fantastic Salesforce platform. And I say, I am an absolute, you cut me through and I say Salesforce, because it was just a phenomenal, it was, you know, despite all the pain and aggro you sometimes get with any IT platform, used well, the Salesforce platform is phenomenally powerful. So yeah, that's a bit of background to where we are with Elements and why we're doing what we're doing. I think the other really important thing about it was that the Nimbus product was a very traditional 1990s business model, on-premise primarily. I mean, we would host it for people, but because of the way it was architected and the whole business model, it was relatively expensive, which meant we had to hire expensive sales teams, which meant that we had to charge more, and it ratchets up and up to the point where only really the global could really afford our offering. With cloud technology, you can completely change the financial dynamics, and rather than being an expensive on-premise offering, we've moved it to being a freemium model where the core diagramming capability and the requirements and story capability is all free, and then there are value-added stuff on top of that for our pro capability and enterprise capability, which means that actually there's an enormous amount we're bringing to the Salesforce community that is available free of charge to use by people. So anyhow, taken probably more than the 60 seconds, but hopefully that gives a bit of background.
No, absolutely, and the freemium model is quite interesting to me. But one of the other things that I noticed on your website, which I thought was pretty funny, is that you had a lot of the things that your customers have said. But when I first had gone to Elements.Cloud, the thing that stood out to me the first was one of the very first things I saw from one of your clients that says, you know that not too many products knock my socks off. This one dropped my pants, with 4 exclamation points. And that hit me. You know, that would be one of those things where when I read it, I was kind of like very taken in by it and interested in more about what your product is doing. But then, as you're going, so that's kind of driving me through your site. I thought that was really humorous, really cool to hear one of your clients say.
That's genuine, by the way. That is not marketing made up. That's actually one of the Salesforce MVPs who said
that's awesome. That's awesome, because I mean, like, that's one of those things that got me, is the honesty in the statement of it. But then that, as I'm looking through the site, I do notice that you have a freemium model. And how does that usually work out for you? So how does what do you get initially versus what you would start kind of adding on later?
So you get, actually, people are genuinely blown away by how much we're giving away for free. And one of the reasons for that, and it's something which is we learned from the previous business, is it's actually to map out your business processes in even a simple way. And we have a very simple notation. It's all about building a hierarchy of diagrams. We have one box type and lines. The idea is if you can describe how your business works with a series of boxes, with basically a description of what it is you do, with lines connecting the boxes. And to give you an idea of the scale that this can go to, going back to the previous business, we had organizations with over 10,000 diagrams in a single hierarchy describing their business. And actually it was because we actually have the ability to version the diagrams. It was the operations manual for the organization. So all of that, the drawing the diagrams, the hierarchies, the ability to create requirements and link those to where they are in the process, decompose those to stories, all of that's free. So it's not limited by size of, we call a process map is a collection of diagrams. There's no size limits. There's no limits on how many diagrams or how many objects on a diagram. And so the reason is that it's actually hard to get people doing this. We didn't want any barriers to people getting going and feeling that they're being lured in, and then there's a gotcha. You can actually you could do an enormous amount and never have to upgrade. Now, clearly, if you want to do it properly and get the real value, we believe that the pro offerings are the things that you're going to want. But there's no obligation. You could do a fantastic job with the free product. You know, we definitely, on the pro side, we've got things which we're doing very specific around the Salesforce, supporting Salesforce. We can extract, and it's not all, but it's most of the metadata as a into our application now as a tree. So all the Apex code, triggers, you know, etc., objects with their fields, validation rules. So it's, you know, give you an idea. There was one we did for a client the other day, which is I think 27,000 nodes in the tree. And by the way, that's how many most big orgs have in terms of a setup. You can then link any one of those nodes in that tree, so it might be a field, it might be an object, to a point in the process. So you could basically start going, this bit of the process uses this validation rule. And the reasons we do this is we did this very successfully for SAP 10 years ago, because we had people wanting to ask two questions. I want to re-engineer my business a bit. Which bits of Salesforce or SAP as it was depends on this? And actually, I'm about to do some work in Salesforce. Which bits of my business might I break because of that? And those are really hard questions to answer. And as the orgs get bigger, and as your business gets more complex, and particularly if they're compliance issues, if you're regulated by the SEC or by the FDA, actually they care that you actually can demonstrate how you run your business. So being able to start documenting your org with where the business uses bits of your org is incredibly valuable. That, for example, is pro. It's still not expensive. We're talking $60 a month for a license, you know, so.
And how many licenses per org would you normally recommend?
It depends on the size of the org. I mean, you know, we expect people start 2 or 3 licenses normally. I mean, if you're a big organization, it's basically, if you wish to be an editor, somebody who draws process diagrams, you need a license. And that gets you access to all of the Salesforce configuration stuff, because you're basically creating the content. Even if you start paying for licenses, every single person in your organization who you want to see that content still free.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that is
so
cool.
we are absolutely trying to make this, the point about the value of this is making the content as accessible to big as an audience as possible. So now
who do you view uses the tool on a regular basis? Who in an organization gets the most value out of a tool like this?
So it's fascinating. It depends on what you actually do with it. So if you're on the project, it's a project team, and you're trying to work out what you're going to build, it's the project team at that point in time. So it's your business analysts trying to map out the process and understand really what you want, defining the requirements. I think the developers, now I'm a developer by heart. That's where I started. I mean, I've been a CTO, I've been CTO, I've been COO, I've been CEO of software companies as well. I'm back being CTO, and I love it, by the way. I am a techie at heart. I think the developers I've worked with really, really, really appreciate seeing the content. They don't have to create the content, but as part of the documentation, actually understanding what the business is trying to achieve with what you're trying to build is really, really, really important. And some of the people who appreciate the content more than anybody else are the developers, because it takes what can often be very fragmented stories and puts them back into the context of what is the business actually trying to do. And
now, would you say that this competes with things like Jira or TaskRate, or do you think it more like augments them?
I think it augments them. So we use our own product in Jira. So we use Jira for the development management side. We're actually building an integration between our product and Jira at the moment, should be by the end of the year available, which allows you to, as a business analyst, think about the processes, define the requirements as business requirements, decompose those into stories. But what you actually find is that, and we've got it here, which is our stories, our business requirement, you might end up with 6 stories associated with requirement, 3 of which affect Salesforce, 2 of which affect another product, and 1 of which actually requires just a manual change to the processes to actually deliver that business requirement. So actually we actually use Jira for building our own product, which we use ourselves, maybe a story. We've actually been using Agile Accelerator from Salesforce for, yeah, I know. We very much drink Salesforce Cloud, Salesforce. I may move to Jira. I do prefer Jira. But on the other hand, we as a vendor want to be able to support Agile Accelerator as well. So, so we're actually taking the stories and moving them to different development groups in different products at the moment from the same requirement. So there is actually a very strong difference between the business understanding what needs to be built and the development organizations running development projects, and actually having that integration such that you can move stories from one to another, and actually the status comes back to the business. So there's a two-way integration. I think it's really important. It is actually absolutely complementary. It's different audiences with different tools to support them at the right point in time.
Okay, that's awesome. So, and that's something that I would want to know because we use Jira here.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we're big users of Jira, so we're very keen to make that integration work really well because we use Elements ourselves when we're thinking about what we're building.
So my next question is, how long out of box does it take to set up?
So that's a really good question. So it depends on, again, it depends on what you are doing. Register, log in, you could be starting to draw your own process diagrams in 60 seconds, okay? Now, because it's a SaaS offering, you literally up comes the browser and you're away. We have particular ways of drawing process diagrams, and our support portal gives lots of guidance on how to create good process content. We also provide quite a number of example process maps, which you can download from a public space, which you've got access to when you register. So in a sense, you can get going immediately. To start delivering value, it's really interesting. It's very easy to draw diagrams. It's quite a bit harder to draw good process diagrams. And the good process diagrams are it's like writing English. You can write words, but you can write garbage. To actually become a good author of English takes skill. To become a good process author and writing good, clear process diagrams takes a degree of skill. And we're doing quite a lot of work to provide training material and support in that area. If you take something like the Salesforce reference model, as we call it, which is being able to suck the configuration out. So quick statement. The core Elements product isn't written on the platform. It's actually it's a native Node application. Runs on AWS, in the AWS cloud. Because even though we're very focused on Salesforce, actually we want to be able to support people who haven't got everybody licensed on Salesforce, for example. Or actually we're just as relevant to people still running SAP. So we decided, however, we have a managed package which allows you to run Elements inside Salesforce, just as it's really just an iframe, but actually there's a lot more to it than that. You can embed diagrams into particular pages, and you can do single sign-on provisioning, etc., into the product. And that's all free, by the way. So all of that stuff's still free. The reference model stuff, sucking all the metadata out to get that set. So you've got to install the package. That standard managed package install, 2-3 minutes maximum, couple of minutes. To get it set up to the point where you've got the reference model sucked in takes about another 3 minutes. And the first time you do the sync will take about 3 minutes. So within 10 minutes, you could be up and running with the metadata inside Elements. You could be starting to link it to your processes. And I mentioned that you can link, this field is used by this process activity. But in the tree, you can also start using it as a place to do general documentation of all your Salesforce org, because you can add notes, URL links, images. You can actually put metadata on there. So actually become the documentation repository for your org.
So now, is any of it like automated, for instance? It would pull down your process builder, all the things that it's associated to, and build out the map for you? Or is this something that you have to do yourself to just kind of document your own process tree?
At the moment, you have to do your own. Now, we're looking at things like taking process builder and whether or not, but normally the value comes from being slightly higher level than process builder. Think about that entire flow, of which process builder is often only doing a small part, even so, of the entire business process. Mm-hmm. What we are in the process, though, of doing is things like, now we've got the entire structure, we are and we're writing at the moment, is the ability to go through every field and work out where every field is used within Salesforce, so that actually there'll be a field usage with hyperlinks. So you can go, this field is used in these 2 process builders, these 3 formula fields, this it's on this page layout, it's on this email template. So that actually we can start automatically doing a level of sort of documentation of things like where fields are used, which users can see which field. Times by people going and profiles, etc. I'm not quite sure who can see what field. So we're starting to do a level of sort of analysis because we've got all the data now. We can actually start doing quite a lot of analysis across that data, and we really call it self-documenting the org. And by the way, this it updates it every night, or you can set every 24 hours. It will do a refresh and update all the changes that you've done in your org, notify you of the changes. But we're also doing things like actually on Friday, the next release, we're releasing a capability where you guys may be less familiar with a new regulation that is coming out in Europe called GDPR. Don't know if not you've heard those terms, but the General Data Protection Regulation. One of the most complex and all-encompassing pieces of regulation for a very long time, which actually affects US companies as well. Any personal data on any resident of an EU country, you then are covered by the regulation, even if you're a US company, for example. GDPR has enormous impact. So we're providing a bunch of GDPR support directly into the reference model at the moment, because you need to be able to identify every field, whether or not the data you're storing is personal data or sensitive personal data. So we're providing the ability to start capturing that information. So we're trying to become a repository for how your business operates, how the org is configured to support that business, and provide the life cycle around, actually you've got some new requirements, whether or not the admin's defining those, or be able to understand what does that mean for your processes? How does that turn into requirements? What does that mean in terms of requirements for change? Turning those into stories that you can then push to the developers. So the developers now genuinely are building the right thing to support the business. Being able to pull the changes to the configuration back and link those to the business processes, so you know which bits of Salesforce are running which bits of the business process. And basically it's a closed loop, because you've now got a better understanding of how Salesforce supports the business. The next new requirements come along, you can start having an informed view about what changes you've got to make. And I say this has been built out of 15 years personal experience as both a developer and COO about how do you actually make Salesforce really work for you in an organization.
Now, this question kind of comes from somebody who works for an ISV. It's myself.
Yeah.
But as a developer for an ISV, there are certain features that are much more my favorite feature of our software than something I would probably push to somebody who is initially, that you're trying to make an initial sale to, right? Like it's one of those things where they'll have to discover it later on. It's not something that you would bring up in an initial sale, but it is your favorite feature of your software. What would you say that for you is?
Well, interesting. It's actually being launched on Friday, and I've just been really, really excited by this. Which is on our process diagrams, you've got boxes with what we call drill downs, which if you click takes you to the diagram below it. You're basically going, I want to expand into that. We've also got the ability to have links which go from one diagram to another, connectors. And now, actually, as you roll over those, we actually will pop up images of the diagrams below or the connectors. And it's just incredibly productive. So instead of having to go to the diagram, and we actually generate the images in 4 different sizes from 150 by 100 pixels up to 1200 by 800. And depending on where you are in the context, we'll show you either a very big image, because it might be really useful to see the context without having to navigate there. And I just find I've been using it on our test service for some time, and I just absolutely love it. It's so much more productive. But I also love it as a techie, because to make that work, we have had to do so many cool things on the AWS platform. in terms of, because from a performance point of view, every time you move even a box 1 pixel, effectively the diagram has changed. But you could be doing that 5 times a second, you know. Therefore, we have to, performance-wise, be really careful about when do we regenerate the image. So actually, we regenerate the image after 5 seconds of no change to the diagram. And actually, to manage that process of capturing that nothing's happened for 5 seconds and then generating the image and doing everything, we use actually Redis to do the time to live with the 5 second stuff. We then push that using SNS through to a serverless Lambda function that is then running Chrome headless to do generation. The tech that we've managed to get to work to do a fantastic job. It's just been brilliant, and it's at 2 levels. One is, I just think the implementation we've done has been a superb showcase of how you can use all the technology that's out there to do a great job. And by the way, it's probably 100 lines of code, but it's 5 lines here and 3 lines there and 20 lines there, using technology to do it.
Another thing I experience is, and it's always really, really cool when you can talk to developers or CTO, people who are kind of like, you know, at the forefront of what their software is doing. But one of my favorite things, and also kind of a boon, is when a client is talking to you and they have a problem and you've got something, but it's going to be months before they see it, and you're kind of like, but in your head you've been using it for months. Do you ever come across that, where you've been using something for so long that it's the solution, and then you kind of go, oh wait, you don't even know that we've moved that bar there now? Or
that's so true. I mean, there's the most sophisticated and complex part of our application is the diagram versioning capability. So, you know, if you've built a big hierarchy of diagrams, the ability to go in and go, actually, we need to change that one diagram and version it and release it, because we have the concept of being able to release content. So we have content either in draft where you're working on it. You've got a ready to publish state where you can go, I'm ready to publish that, but I'm not, you know, we're going to release it all at one point in time. We have the current master version, we have archives, and managing a hierarchy and making sure all the links work and everything is really, really complex. It's probably the most, it's really our USP at a technical level, is making that work. And I think we've done a really good job of implementing that. We learned a lot from our previous product of how not to do it fundamentally. You know, rebooting is always a good way to fix those conceptual problems you had.
Refactoring the company instead of your code.
The issue is that it's months before people get to the point where they're sophisticated enough or have enough content to want to version, and you're sitting there going, you're just not using my coolest part of my product. You know, so. But by the way, when you get there, it is, I mean, it does the job really, really well, and my devs have done an awesome job of putting that stuff together and realizing my vision of that. But you're right, it's, you know, it's the bit which I spent the most time working on personally. We spend months doing it, and there are very few people yet really using it properly, but they will do, because as you get more content and this becomes trusted, you've got to version this properly. And it's not just like versioning a single document. We actually, it's more, think of, we've actually built almost sort of GitHub for complex hierarchy of process content into our product. Super cool. But things like, by the end of the year, you'll also, the same time as you release the process content, we'll be taking a version of the reference model, so that's tree structure, and we'll release both the processes and the Salesforce configuration at that point in time together, so that actually you can go back and go, what bit of Salesforce is supporting this process at this point in time? And you just start to get that history about how you have, so the documentation is being properly versioned. And whilst this is incredibly helpful day to day for generally, if you actually move and you're in an organization which has to be regulated, you know, but probably the most hardcore regulator on the planet is actually the US FDA, Food and Drug Administration, where they will close your factory down like that. And by the way, I'm very glad about that, given that they're responsible for what goes into my body. I'm quite pleased they're pretty hardcore about it, you know. But they will come into your factory, you know, or, you know, if you've released a bad set of vaccines or something like that, and they will go, we want to know what your operating procedures and processes were on the 12th of July 2015 at 14:33 in the afternoon. Because that's when the problem occurred, and you've got to demonstrate how you're operating there. That's what our product, at its most extreme end, that's what our product is about being able to do, is to go back and go, our operating processes, and actually the way we configured Salesforce was like this at that point in time. So, you know, we start from being able to, if you want to draw 2 diagrams and free and get going just as a sketch pad about what you want to do, Elements can help you. Free, sign up today. If you want to build the operations manual, and we're talking to some of the world's largest companies at the moment, and it will be some time before we've got all the features they need. But, you know, actually, I want to be able to deliver an operations manual describing how the business works to 300,000 people, and we're regulated and we have to show compliance. That's the extreme end of where we're heading to with our product as well. So, yeah, and we plan to support, you know, I talked about the fact that in the previous company we ran, we really ended up at a price point of only supporting the global 500. Our ambition is to be able to support the global 5 million, is how we describe it here. There is no reason with a freemium model and with the tech that we're using that any company on the planet, however big or small, shouldn't be able to use our product to document the processes which they use. And from a point of view of the community, that the Salesforce developer community, hopefully the developers get actually better requirements and better stories which really support what the business is trying to do. Hey, if we can help that, then I've done my job.
Yeah, I like that. I do have a question. I'm hearing kind of as we talk, we've got these diagrams that may then drill down into other diagrams. That nested diagram feature, is that freemium still, or is that?
Yeah, that's free. That's all free. Yeah.
Oh, that's a beautiful thing.
However many diagrams you want, 10,000, it's still free.
Okay.
So now
the power comes when you want to start bringing the Salesforce configuration and link it. And there's on the diagram, I mean, there are features on the diagram which are premium, you know, you've got to pay for, but the core drawing diagrams, adding metadata to any activity box, adding the attachments, adding requirements, linking the requirements, stories, all free. You know, we decided to set the bar really high, and it's our obligation to provide the community with features which sit above that they go, we really want.
Yeah.
You know, we do not. I'm a developer. I hate if I get into a product I like and then realize there's a gotcha. Just pisses me off. You know, we're trying not to provide gotchas in the product. We're really clear about, if you want that, you're going to pay for it. But actually, you can continue to do what you're doing today without ever having to pay.
Yeah, as a consultant, goes into a bunch of different orgs. I'm already seeing, like, wow, I could use even just the freemium piece to make my job a little easier.
There's a bunch of stuff we've done in Elements to make it. If you think about how GitHub works, where you can be a member of multiple organizations, we have exactly the same type of model. So you as a user can belong, we call them spaces. So a space is a group of content, diagrams, requirements, reference models, etc. You can belong to multiple spaces. So as a consultant, you can create a space for a client and go and do work with them. You can invite them into that space, viewer, etc. Actually, editor in the free space. You know, you can hand that space over to the client at the end of the project if you want, and they can continue to have you as a consultant, still being able to see and contribute, but they effectively own the space now. So we've done lots. Richard and myself have all been consultants at some part in our life. You know, so we understand, and we also understand that a lot of the process discovery work is done by the consulting organizations out there. So we needed to provide a tool set which works for the consultants as well. So yeah, hopefully we've done a reasonably good job of that. Hey, love to get feedback from anybody who's using the product about what works, what doesn't work for them. But we've tried to engineer it to work for the consultant community, the developer community, and I'm going to call it, in the broader sense, the quality management community. People who are worried about how well the business runs, the continuous improvement, business excellence community.
Mm-hmm. Now, to bring this thing full circle, are you going to have a booth at Dreamforce this year for people to come and check
We're not
out?
going to have a booth ourselves at Dreamforce. We're hoping that that we're going to be able to demonstrate in somebody who's going to be very, very, very well represented. We can't say who it is, but it's pretty exciting for us about who we're doing an integration with at the moment. That will it'll be far more powerful than us having our own booth. We'll all be around at Dreamforce. I'm really looking forward to it. As my accent may give it away a bit, I'm actually currently living on the in the UK again. I have lived in San Francisco, but I'm back in the UK. But I'm coming over for Dreamforce, so yeah, really looking forward to that.
Good.
So I do want to let our viewers know, anybody who wants to find out more about Elements.Cloud, you can visit their site, Elements.Cloud.com. Or not .com, sorry, that's just total habit for me. Yeah. Just Elements.Cloud. You can also follow them on Twitter at Elements_Cloud. We do want to take this time to say thank you to Adrian. I'm not seeing any questions coming through that we haven't asked already. So I really do want to tell you that we do appreciate having you on today, Adrian.
Oh, it's been great. And it's, well, you know my views on the Salesforce world, and it's fantastic to have guys like you doing stuff as you do to just, help the community. So, I appreciate that as well.
Anytime.
Yeah.
All right. Guys, hope to see you 5 weeks' time.
Yes, we will see you at Dreamforce. And hopefully any of you who are watching still, we will see you at Dreamforce as well. Come see me at the Map Anything booth. That's where I'll be stationed. So perfect. Ryan will be walking around.
I'll be walking around aimlessly.
That's right. All right. Thank you, guys. Remember, like, subscribe, and have a great week. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
All right. Fantastic. Thanks, guys.